Easier. Picture a hero. It could be a superhero or an international super spy. You can choose. Full of extraordinary abilities, but somehow they're now gagged and tied up, hidden away in a cave somewhere. Maybe they're now dangling over a pit of mutant crocodiles that haven't been fed in months, or they're sitting on a bomb that's got 5 minutes left on a very loud countdown timer. You can fill in the level of detail that you want. Now picture the classic villain monologue. The bad guy, probably in black lycra and boots, with a cape that's far too long to be practical, parading triumphantly in front of our seemingly defeated hero, spilling their guts on their evil plan to our hero, before finally doing away with them. Maybe their plan is to take over the world or to destroy it. Maybe it's an extreme form of revenge or an attempt to steal some ancient artifact to make them immortal. Whatever the plan is, we know that it rarely comes to pass because, of course, our hero manages to snake out of the jaws of death and consequently use all the information the villain probably should not have disclosed to save the day, save the world, and probably make someone fall in love with them too. It's a classic trope, isn't it? The villain gets a little too cocky, says a little too much, and bam, that's the very thing that leads to their downfall. That intoxicating feeling of power, feeling like they're finally in control, creates a level of pride and arrogance that makes villains feel like they've got to tell someone how much of a genius they are. Heroes and villains is a storyline that's been around for a long time. In the book of Esther, Haman is our villain. When the story of Esther is told to Jewish children at Purim, the festival Ellen talked about last week, the kids are meant to boo every time Haman's name is mentioned. His evil plan is to wipe out an entire race of people because one of those people would not respect him. He might not have had the evil plan monologue like we see in the movies, but Haman did have a craving for control. And he did seem to think of himself as something of a master puppeteer, manipulating the future, manipulating the king and the king's power, all in accordance with his master plan. He thought he was pretty darn clever. But in reality, was Haman ever truly in control? Haman's evil plan is a classic revenge story, and it was birthed when Mordecai, a lowly Jewish official, part of the group of Jews imported into the Persian Empire, wouldn't bow down to Haman when he was supposed to. Haman gets a chip on his shoulder from this, not just against Mordecai, but the entire Jewish race in their province. The Message version says that Haman hated to waste his fury on just one Jew. Why stop there, right? Haman is also identified as an Agagite, which might mean that he's literally descended from some long-term enemies of the people of God. Or he could just be a figurative descendant. It's like a classic rematch where you discover, probably in the villain monologue, that the father of the villain and the father of the hero once had a legendary battle. And here we are again, a generation later. Who will come out on the right side of history this time? There are three main ways we see Haman's thirst for control. He's superstitious and tries to control fate and time. He's scheming and tries to control the king and the law. And he is self-centered and tries to control his own success and honor. Let's jump in at Esther 3, verse 7. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Casting lots in this way is part of the Persian and surrounding worldview, where they believed that at the start of the year, in the first month, you could check which days in the year were lucky days, basically, and therefore good days to do important things. A modern day equivalent might be reading ahead in the horoscopes to see which day is going to work out best for you to do something significant. Not a practice that I recommend, by the way. Haman, along with the rest of his culture, believed in fate and good fortune, and Haman tried to leverage this superstitious advantage for his own ends. He thought he had time, luck, and fate all under his control. Esther 3, verse 8 to 11. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all the other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." So suddenly, Haman's grudge has become a threat to the king himself. Haman's problem threatens the whole kingdom, apparently. We know from the rest of the story that the king is a bit of a useless drunk, not concerned about much other than his own luxury, entertainment, and pride. It seems like Haman is exploiting those weaknesses on purpose here, manipulating the truth, exaggerating, and presenting the whole race of the Jews as completely rebellious and a threat to the king's dominion. And Haman is willing to hand over quite a lot of cash to ease this agenda through. If the king, his pride, and his power were a puppet, Haman was pulling all the right strings, totally in control. Or so he thought. Esther 6 tells us a little side story. The king couldn't sleep, so he has someone read him a bedtime story, the record of his reign, the memoir of his time as king so far, basically. Sounds like a bit of a self-absorbed choice if you ask me, but maybe they didn't have many options back then. I don't know. He learns that Mordecai had saved his life from a couple of guards who had plotted to kill him, and that Mordecai didn't get any reward for that. The king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" So he answered the king, "For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" "Go at once," the king commanded Haman. "Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman does it and is totally humiliated when he gets home to his wife and friends. "Can you believe the thing I had to do today?" Haman was so blinded by his pride, and I'm sure he probably figured, "Oh yes, who else could it possibly be?" Let's see how far we can push this guy to demonstrate that I'm the man. Let me pull these strings again and put on my best persuading voice once again. He makes it too easy. Totally in control, right? Not this time. In fact, it was the worst possible outcome for Haman. The guy he hates the most, the whole reason he's got this whole plan going, is the recipient of this big showy parade. Oops. It's a bit of a taste of what's to come, isn't it? From this point, everything falls apart for Haman. He's invited to banquets with the king and queen, but he discovers that his plot has one key problem. Queen Esther is a Jew, and the king is not impressed that his right-hand man would seek to wipe out her people. And just like in the Bible Project video we watched, there's a massive reversal as Haman is killed on the very stake he had built for Mordecai. And the edict attacking the Jewish people is edited to give them the right to defend themselves. Doesn't work. Foiled again. Last week, Alan mentioned that a key question at the heart of the story of Esther is who is in control? As we've covered, Haman thought he was. He had all of his ducks in a row, pulling all the right strings, getting all the right permissions and authorities to do whatever he darn well pleased. Yet in the end, Haman is powerless. His own plans kill him. He didn't know Mordecai had saved the king's life. He didn't know that Esther, the king's favorite wife, was one of those Jews that he hated. He didn't know that the Almighty God of heaven and earth was the provider and deliverer of the very people that he wished to destroy. The battle was always so much bigger than Haman could have ever imagined. And here's the ridiculous thing. Haman was never in control. The seemingly invisible God who goes unnamed in this story is the one in control all along. That's how not in control Haman was. Haman's superstitious attempts to choose the perfect, luckiest day for his plan was no match for the all-knowing, all-powerful God who commands the direction of history. Haman's manipulations and bribery to further his own agenda could never compare to the ever-present God whose plans for his people are good. And Haman's pride and arrogance could never withstand the wrath of a righteous, truthful, holy judge. There are a few things we can reflect on here. First, we can take comfort that our God is in control, even when we can't see it. Even when it seems like God's name is not mentioned in this chapter, when the future looks bleak, when death seems near, or when whoever is in power might wield their power in ways that terrify us. God is in control. God commands the direction of history. God's plans for his people are good. And God will always be a righteous, truthful, holy judge. Second, if God is in control, that means that we are not. And we don't need to be. And we ought not to try to be. Instead of having hearts that are faced inwards, seeking our own agendas, our own success, our own comfort, our own selfish ends, motivated by fear and pride, Jesus commands us, and the Holy Spirit enables us to have radically outward-facing hearts, seeking his kingdom, his glory, his honor, in seeking to bless and provide for others, motivated by love and trust. Trusting in the God who is in control means that we don't have to seek our own preservation anymore. His plans for us are good. Dwell in that peace. Step into that rest. A line from a favorite song of mine called Nothing I Hold On To goes, I lean not on my own understanding. My life is in the hands of the maker of heaven. It's powerful. Third, Haman's pride and need for control were the death of him. This prayer and self-denial series calls that the Haman habit. We're all prone to it. But Jesus said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. Perhaps there are things that we revere and trust in for security more than God. This week, perhaps take some time to notice behaviors and tendencies that might reveal something about a deeper heart posture. What can you not get through a day without doing or thinking or talking about? Who or what do you defend without fail? Who or what do you complain about regularly? Where do you go when you're deeply afraid, anxious, or angry? What might that say about where your trust is? Surrendering ourselves, our worries, our fears, our desires, our needs, our very lives to the God who is in control leads us to live lives rooted in him and free to live gospel-centered, cross-shaped, grace-filled, sacrificially loving lives, more deeply aware of what God is doing in us, around us, and around the world. We're free to serve and to love when we aren't trying to be or to stay in control. Grace and peace.